The views expressed on the Final Straw Radio do not necessarily reflect those of Asheville FM, Friends of Community Radio, or any of the affiliate radio stations airing the show. You're listening to WSFM LP 103.3 FM in Asheville, North Carolina. This is the Final Straw, and I'm William Goodenough. The show can also be heard on KWTF in Bodega Bay, California, KOWA in Olympia, Washington, and WCRS in Columbus, Ohio. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions or suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net. Also, if you care to, you can send us, if you're interested in rebroadcasting any episode or segment of the show, you are free to do so. Just send us an email so that we know you're out there. If you'd like, you can send us letters at The Final Straw, care of Asheville FM, 864 Haywood Road, Asheville, North Carolina, 28806. The show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned cooperative in Asheville specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a sample of Firestorm's catalog of books and zines, plus a full calendar of events at their website, firestorm.coop.
This week on The Final Straw, we air Conversation Bursts, had with a member of New York City Anarchist Black Cross, heretofore known as NYC ABC. For a good portion of the hour, we speak about this activist's views on anarchist support for prisoners and long-term liberation prisoners. We also talk about the work that NYC ABC does, including prisoner letter writing nights, the Running Down the Walls event coordinated with numerous folks on the outside and with incarcerated comrades, recently unveiled Project FANG, which sets aside regular visitation funds for animal and earth liberation prisoners and their loved ones, their U.S. Political Prisoners graphic guide, updated monthly, and more. You can find out more about NYC ABC on their website at nycabc.wordpress.com or find them on the various and insidious social media platforms that are out there. Also of note, in a few days, we'll be releasing the second half of the former political prisoner panel from the 2016 North American Anarchist Black Cross Conference in Denver. This year we heard from Sekua Kambui, Daniel McGowan, Kazi Torre, and John Tucker. To hear the first portion and to check out brief bios of these folks, you can visit thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org and look up NAABC.
But first, a few announcements. This is from the IWOC. When you have a minute, please call WMCC Prison Warden Sherry Korneman in Missouri at area code 816-632-1390 and say, quote, I am calling to do a wellness check on James Shelby, prisoner number 41244. My friend told me his life is in danger due to medical negligence. If he was not sent back to the hospital after November 14th, he needs to be taken immediately, end quote. Again, that name and number is Warden Sherry Korneman at 816-632-1390. As many of you have probably heard, the Standing Rock Camp for Resisting the Dakota Access Pipeline has recently been issued an eviction notice to take effect on December 5th, though they are generously granting people a so-called free speech zone well away from the camp and sacred lands. Updates from the camp have been flying out fast in recent weeks, most notably having to do with the police and Army's use of force essentially being tantamount to torture and brutality. In the wake of the eviction notice, there has been a call from Standing Rock for a broadening of tactics for people wanting to stand in solidarity with water protectors. To that end, there is a collection of names and addresses of people directly related to the Dakota Access Pipeline, which you can use as you see fit. The authors of the piece are very clear to state that they do not endorse so-called illegal activity, quote, but that the list is for education and outreach purposes only, end quote. However, I think that it is also safe to say that people should use their discretions when coming up with any actions they would like to see happen. You can see this full article plus the list of names and addresses at the fantastic Anarchist news website, itsgoingdown.org, and you can search the name of the article, which is hashtag NoDAPL, Indigenous Land Defense and Strategic Solidarity, Pressuring Power and Capital. And finally, please help to build Portland's movement Total and Collective Liberation. They need donations. Many people have been outraged by the election, Standing Rock prison industrial complex, white supremacy, and capitalism in general. We are all fed up and need to take a stand. The left movement in general is grossly underfunded and inhibits our ability to control the narrative with social media and, of course, trumpeting the corporate media. Many activists are getting arrested and charged for all kinds of things. We need to keep our communities safe. However, the movement needs funds to actually move forward and fix this whole system, and not because it is broken. It is because we need to build something new, not fix broken things. It was never a broken system and was meant to do exactly what it is doing. Help spread the word. You can donate here at gofundme.com/support-fund-anti-Trump-activist.
What you say, what you say, what you say, what? We'll come like a flood!
We're getting close to the end of the year, for anyone out there who doesn't have a firm grasp of the obvious. And I was looking back through the calendar to see if I could find where my time went. By my sense of things, I'm missing several months. I don't even remember spring. Did we have spring? We did, didn't we? Anyway, looking through the calendar, I saw all of the capitalized holidays, the ones that the federal government recognizes, and I noticed something. You know, just a curious observation. And whenever I have a curious observation, you have to suffer through it. The word holiday is really a mashup of two words, holy and day. Holidays began as holy days, days that are held sacred by practitioners of a common religion. And it struck me that as Americans, we have our own set of holidays or holy days. And that means that as Americans, we suffer from a common religion. Did I say suffer? Yeah, I meant that. Just wanted to point that out in case anybody missed it. So where was I? Yeah, Americanism is a kind of secular religion, a particular denomination of nationalism. And this secular religion has its own religious calendar. Let me walk you through it. We start with New Year's Day on January 1st, a recognized holy day. This day is set aside on our secular religious calendar with a prohibition against work, much like the Sabbath under Judaism. We spend New Year's Day recovering from alcohol poisoning and attempting to recover all of the photocopies and or selfies of our various body parts that were distributed the night before. Next, we have Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. We celebrate this holy day with a work prohibition, so America doesn't feel nearly as racist as it really is. Also, we can't celebrate Malcolm X Day because he said things like, chickens come home to roost, and other stuff that makes him too radical for a racist nation to ever embrace him. So, by default, we have Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. Imagine if we celebrated Nat Turner Day, white men in suits chased by machete-wielding blacks. Yeah, but I digress. In February, we have President's Day, where we worship the deluded hierarchs who assumed the right to rule us, some of whom have their faces dynamited into the side of sacred Native American burial grounds. But there is no corresponding Tecumseh Day, or Crazy Horse Day, or Geronimo Day. And there are no Native American faces dynamited into the grounds of Arlington National Cemetery. Go figure. In May and November, we have Memorial Day and Veterans Day, respectively, two holy days that serve as bookends for our crop cycle. So at planting and harvesting, we worship those who have maintained the colonizers' babies for breakfast program. Flags, hot dogs, prosthetics, yay for us. That takes us to July 4th, where we celebrate American independence. Fireworks, more flags, more hot dogs, bad music. Labor Day comes in the fall, where we pay lip service to the value of toiling under oppression, and worshiping everyone who came before us, wasting their lives the way we waste ours. More hot dogs, flags, beer. Next we have Columbus Day, celebrating the central figure to the vast extermination of the people who lived here before we planted a flag and built a Walmart. Our celebrating of Columbus Day in America is analogous to Germans celebrating Hitler Day if they had won their expansionist war. Those silly Germans. Nobody commits genocide as effectively as Americans. Next we have Halloween, where we dress up our kids in a throwback to a time when delinquents extorted food from homeowners under the threat of burning down their houses. Now our kids just play sugar-coated Russian roulette with razor blades concealed by sociopathic strangers. or get hopped up on an overdose of high fructose corn syrup and hallucinate all night long. Which takes us to Thanksgiving, where we overindulge on tryptophan in celebration of some essential American values, like befriending and manipulating others before murdering their kids and stealing their land. Then we sleep through football that's symbolic of encroachment and colonization. Then, the next day, we recreate the original slaughter, only we do it at the mall, and we use credit cards instead of swords. Conquest is so American. Fast forward to Christmas when we celebrate Superman coming to Earth from Krypton in a virgin's womb. I don't know, I might have that mythology confused. Pardon me. On Christmas, we have dry trees covered in electrical lights in our living rooms because baby Jesus is a firebug who likes burning down trailer parks. We place our children in the lap of a strangely dressed bearded stranger in order to condition us for when we hand them over to Uncle Sam, so he can shove them out of a plane over some defenseless third world spot needing a pipeline. And that takes us back to New Year's Eve, where we pathologically drink ourselves into oblivion and photocopy our butts again. So to wrap it all up, America's holy days appear to revolve around the worship of warmongers, hierarchs, and genocidal sociopaths, with a token black guy tossed in for good measure, and a day of lip service to hard work setting you free, even though it won't, and a couple of holidays that are thinly disguised reenactments of child sacrifice. When we consider this secular religion of Americanism by analytically considering its designated holy days, we recognize how profoundly disturbing it really is. Let's do the sensible thing in 2017. Let's scrap it. Hashtag dumpster fire. Now, before you go there, I don't even know what that means. I just figured that would be a nice way to end the segment. This is Anarchist prisoner Sean Swain from War and Corruptional in Lebanon, Ohio. If you're listening, you are the resistance.
I just wanna celebrate.
You can write to Sean Swain at his new address by directing it to Sean Swain, 243-205, Warren, CI, P.O. Box 120, 5787 State Route 63, Lebanon, Ohio, 45036. For updates on his situation, his bid for U.S. President in 2016, and more writings by Sean can be found at seanswain.org.
So I'm speaking with a collective member from New York City Anarchist Black Cross. Thanks a lot for taking the time to chat.
Sure. Thanks for having me on.
And can you tell a little bit about what New York City ABC does? What sort of projects y'all are involved in?
Sure. We are a collective who organizes support for U.S.-held political prisoners and prisoners of war. And we have, I guess our most consistent project is we do an every other week letter writing dinner, and it's very straightforward. We make food, we provide, stationery, postage, all the basics, and a little bit of information on whoever we're focusing on. And we are actually in our 10th year. So we've been doing that same letter writing event every other Tuesday for 10 years.
That's amazing.
Through it all, I believe we've missed about 3 of them, where we've had to cancel for one reason or another. But if you're unfamiliar with prisoner support or Anarchist Black Cross groupings in general, we will do everything from really baseline support, so writing letters, phone calls, visits, care packages, when the prisons will allow it, and then kind of mundane things like a prisoner needs something researched, so we'll look it up online and mail them in some results, or there's a medical emergency, and so we try to rally support. There's financial support, there's legal support, there's a lot that goes into it that on the surface is kind of mundane, but once you've built relationships with people who are imprisoned, especially folks coming out of movements that either we are directly a part of or we share affinity with, it's easy to grasp, and it's easy to see the importance and the relevance of keeping people connected to their communities, and and also learning from the examples of people who've been imprisoned for political actions.
One of the things that's marked the development of Anarchist Black Cross in the United States over the years has been distinctions or differentiations or discussions in the past of who to support and like whether they're anarchist people or whether they're from specific movements outside of anarchism or what sort of actions people have taken. And I imagine like most of the folks that are involved in NYC ABC are on the younger side of things and from the anarchist movement, or is that like a false?
No, young being relative. Yeah, folks are younger than some of the other, I guess, more conventional political prisoner support groups. But part of it is the same reasoning. A lot of those other support groups are people who, out of necessity, supported their friends and comrades. So they're people who are, they're coming out of movements from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And as a result, they were, in their youth in those decades. And so their support bases are typically older. The folks we support come from a pretty wide variety of movements. And, we're very upfront about being anarchists. We don't hide that from the prisoners, and we don't hide the fact that we might not agree on a lot of, political issues, a lot of strategies. But that builds in respect, having an honest conversation with someone as opposed to lionizing them and putting them on a pedestal builds a relationship and not a charity. And so while the folks in NYC ABC tend to be younger, the folks who we support, span a pretty wide range.
What are the rules that you determine, like who to support and who not to support generally?
We support folks coming from revolutionary movements, and that means a lot of times it's coming from like people's liberation movements. So we support folks who are part of Black liberation movements, American Indian movements, white anti-imperialists, and then we also support folks who have more recently been targeted by the government, folks coming out of earth and animal liberation movements and anarchists. Those last groups of folks are really seem to be most heavily targeted by the federal government. We don't include folks from movements that run counter to our ideals. So there are white nationalists, white supremacists, those kinds of folks who claim political prisoners. And we view them as not only like counter-revolutionary, but in fact like foot soldiers for, the same type of bullshit that the government and its, its capitalist arm have been perpetrating for, since their inception.
Yeah. Outside of like a direct feeling of solidarity for those individuals that have been in for a long time, can you talk about like some of the importance of the sort of like a multi-generational support model that y'all and other chapters are implementing?
Yeah, I mean, our the ideas behind what drive our support are, severalfold. One is that we believe that if we are very obvious and very explicit in our support of folks who are taking political actions, it frees people up to take riskier actions if they know that they're going to have support. It helps us hedge against people who have been arrested from either turning snitch or informant or providing testimony because they know that they have support. It's unimaginably scary if you get arrested and feel like there's nothing out there for you and no one who's going to support you, and you feel boxed in to the point where you're willing to do or say virtually anything to save your own ass, and you feel that A, there's no support, and B, there's no consequence, that there's no, there's kind of the positive and negative reinforcement. Mm-hmm. You feel that there's no negative repercussions for you providing this information. Beyond that, we want to keep people connected to their communities. So that's not just people who are young anarchists or earth or animal liberation prisoners. It's people who have been imprisoned for decades and who, maybe their support communities have kind kind of aged out. You know, we're really facing a trying time where we have a lot of elders in prison and they are dying in prison and they don't have the support they need. And then there are a lot of people who we really can't learn from. Like, they're people who are coming out of militant movements and revolutionary movements, and you know, they have a lot to teach. So for me personally, that's the reasoning behind you know, supporting like this multi-generational, multi-movement collection of political prisoners. I do want to note that that's not to the exclusion of an understanding of prison as political in general, especially in, you know, a country that is founded on and exists on white supremacist, capitalist, so-called democracy, you know. But we're limited in resources, so we focus on the folks that you know, that we find affinity with, and we work on in areas that we, you know, where we can.
So you've been working on and just unveiled this new strategy or a new project called Project Fang, correct?
Project Fang.
Project Fang.
Correct. Over the course of the last couple of years, we've gotten a fairly consistent donation source that the donor wants us to focus on Earth and Animal Liberation prisoners, and it's not a wide range of people. There aren't a whole lot of folks currently in, but with the resources and the funding that we're not accustomed to, we were trying to find areas that really could use assistance in the form of like financial aid, material aid, and we realized there's a huge gap in visitation for folks. There's just not a lot of means, you know, for folks to receive visits, and so what Project Fang does is it allows prisoners once a quarter to apply for a stipend for their visitors. So what they do is they send in an application. It lists one or more prisoners who are already approved on their visitor list. And
one or more visitors.
One or more.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if they have one person and only one person they want to come visit them, then they just put them down.
Yeah.
But if they're not sure if that person is even going to want the funds, or, you know, whatever reasons why they may want more than one person, then they can put down multiple folks, and we then go through the process of contacting the first person on their list. And it's like a two-tiered structure. So we have either a $500 or a $300 stipend, and, you know, we encourage people to only ask for what they need, but not to be shy. If they feel like they are going to need $500, then ask for it. And then from there, you know, we just send a money order. It's like pretty straightforward. It's a travel fund that doesn't currently exist for a lot of prisoners. So what we're hoping is that after this first year, we're able to expand the project and offer this travel fund to a wider range of folks. And we're in the process of implementing the technology that allows people to donate frequent flyer miles. So we've heard from, you know, friends, comrades, family, that there are folks who they know who travel a lot and they accrue a lot of these frequent flyer miles. And so if there's an easy way for those miles to then just be like transferred over, that puts us in a position where we're freeing up a lot of the financial contribution by being able to contribute miles, and that expands the fund right away, and it opens it up to a broader range of folks.
So you get this amount of miles that are donated, then suddenly that cash that was in that could be transferred over to another prisoner or to another guest of another prisoner.
Right.
Okay. So a lot of animal and earth liberation prisoners, folks who maybe have like done property destruction or like under that definition released mink or released other animals that were held in captivity, possibly for fur farms or for animal agriculture or what have you, like they oftentimes now more and more are being charged under federal terms in terms of like the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, right? So once they get the federal charges, instead of just this like hypothetical person's in Illinois releases a bunch of mink, then they get like, oh, they were traveling across state lines to release the mink, or the mink farms in a few states are charging them, and therefore they get put into federal, and federal allows them to get sent to a facility possibly very far away from their family. Is that about right?
Right. And well, a lot of times, also, following the breeding schedules for, I mean, if we're talking specifically about prisoners who are imprisoned for releasing animals, a lot of times they will follow these breeding schedules, and they know the time of year to release whatever the animals are and destroy the breeding cards. And so a lot of times when these folks get caught, they're caught far away from home anyway, because they know the states that these fur farms are most populous. Yeah. Another way that, I mean, if fur is taken from an animal and then sold across state lines, that automatically qualifies it under federal terms as well. It seems as though there's less emphasis on animal liberation folks as domestic terrorists as there was, say, a decade ago. Mm-hmm. But they are still tried under this incredibly up law, this piece of legislation called the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, which allows a terrorism enhancement for property destruction or a whole host of otherwise, seemingly benign actions. And then with that terrorism enhancement, they can also be sentenced to an additional 20 years. So they take it serious enough to try to use this cudgel to really intimidate an entire movement.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of visitation for folks that haven't spent any time inside or don't know any folks that are inside? Like, what does visitation do in terms of keeping up spirits or physical or mental health?
It works on a lot of levels. It works on the very immediate of all of the psychological benefits that go into having immediate support in the form of someone sitting, either through a sheet of glass or in the same room, directly across from you. It also helps to show the prisons that these folks have support, and it's not just in the form of an occasional postcard or letter, but that, there are people who are really keeping an eye on what's going on with these prisoners. So it helps them, in ways that are a little more subtle and I guess a little less obvious. But we hear from prisoners, and it's one of the saddening things. I mean, there are a lot of things that go into prisoner support that are saddening, but to hear that someone has been in for years without a visit is and without expectation of a visit, they've steeled themselves to the point where they don't expect to see anyone, family or friends, until they get out of prison. It's devastating.
Mm. Yeah, and if you're having to survive day in, day out, especially with guards telling you you're a piece of shit or whatever, and having to compete against all these other people in there that are suffering from the same sort of pressures and need to perform and compete or whatever, it seems like it would really, break down an individual.
Right, and there's just something about a physical visit that can never be translated into a letter. It doesn't matter if you have a regular correspondent and you're sending back and forth, several letters a week, or if, you're under one of these new electronic communication systems where you're able to, email, even once a day or whatever. It's never going to be the same as, the kind of natural conversation that comes about with sitting in a room with someone. And so, the kinds of responses and the kinds of, I guess, the sense of humanity that people are able to retain in having, a physical presence in their life, and knowing that their entire identity and worldview isn't only what they're being socialized through, being in prison.
I guess finally, are you all going to post anything up on your website or Facebook or anything about Project Fang? And is there a desire, like, despite the fact that you've got a stipend already coming into it, is there a desire for folks on the outside to contribute or try to engage with Project Fang at all?
I mean, there is a means to donate. We're not pushing that right now. We have the funding, and it's incredibly rare, as someone who's worked on anarchist projects for a couple of decades, to say that we have enough funding.
Yeah.
But for right now, we do. We have good funding to get us through at least the first year. But if folks want to check out more about the site, about the project, then they can go to nycabc.wordpress.com/fang. And really, for right now, we just want people to know that it exists. We want it to hopefully serve as a model. Maybe other groups are able to work on the same thing, or maybe they want to get involved. Right now, it's a process. While the Earth and Animal Liberation Fund is something that is facilitated specifically through NYC-ABC, Project Fang is a collaboration between us and Sacramento Prisoner Support. If it's something that grows in the way that we hope it grows, maybe other individuals or groups will want to get involved and figure out ways to, like, implement certain tech or promote it in a way that that really gets it out to this broader range of prisoners. At that point, maybe we'll seek outside funding. But really, there are enough amazing projects that are pushing like anarchist politics forward that we would rather see anarchy grow.
Mm-hmm. So you were saying something a little bit earlier before we were recording about about the role of anarchism in prison resistance and the role of prison resistance in anarchism and wanting to grow that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. And I'm not shy about saying that it was in the context of complimenting The Final Straw. I think that
Thank you.
What the show does is something that it helps situate prisoners' struggles, prisoner support, political and otherwise, in a broader framework. It helps situate that within kind of overlapping communities of anarchy and anarchism. And what we try to do in our work is we try to do the same thing. We try to, as a collective of explicitly anarchist folks, we try to bring an anarchist approach to political prisoner support, which means that we work with a lot of groups who are doing that type of support work but aren't anarchists. And so it helps to we hear from prisoners directly that some of the most important support that they get is not just from us. I'm not here to just promote us, but amongst anarchist, primarily ABC crews and collectives. And so part of what we want to do is we want to make sure that as anarchists, we are pushing representing a certain worldview. And at the same time, we want to make sure that political prisoner support is something that is relevant and important within anarchist communities. Because if we're not there to support our comrades, then if or when we ourselves find ourselves arrested or hemmed up in some way, we don't already have these models of support. So for me, it's as important as having, whether it's, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but, it used to be pirate radio was something, or food not bombs, or, for a while it was critical mass. There were just these kind of boxes that you ticked off to prove that you were a vibrant anarchist community. Mm-hmm. And I think now it's important, knowing that anarchists are being targeted, knowing that there are grand juries that, that are convened around anarchist activity. Now that street militancy is really kind of on the upswing, not just amongst anarchists, but just in general, there's a real movement of people in the streets that being prepared, like knowing how the state represses people and knowing how to respond to that, up to and including like prisoner support, is something that like we just have to take seriously.
If folks in the listening audience are interested in starting an ABC chapter or learning off of ABC models, like with with the caveat that different chapters operate slightly in different ways and there's not a cookie cutter, how would you suggest that folks might go about like getting a crew together and thinking about using that format?
Well, one of the things that we do in NYC ABC is we try to provide a lot of resources. We don't want to be like a central organization where even people in our city like come to join. Like we would like to see people take the resources that we have available and that other groups have and use them in the way that makes the most sense to them. So we have a monthly update to an illustrated guide, which has like photos of all the folks we support, little biographies, and in the back there's like a how to stay safe, how to write a letter, like just kind of an introductory package. We have a bunch of like brochures and pamphlets for all the prisoners we support, and we encourage people to download those and change the information on the back so that their local group is, you know, it's like something that's fairly simple, and you can start an ABC group just by downloading some stuff and being, you know, going to where you think that you're going to have the most impact in terms of talking about the folks who need the kind of support that ABC groups historically have provided. If you go to nycabc.wordpress.com, there are a lot of different tabs and buttons and links to other groups. Like, you know, if there's a group that's somewhere near you, we've never come across a group that wasn't helpful in trying to, you know, aid folks in starting a group of their own. So I would say that's a good place to start. We are, of course, all over the hydra that is social media. So you can find us at NYCABC pretty much everywhere.
You're on Twitter, you're on Facebook,
on
you're
Twitter,
on Instagram,
Facebook,
I would imagine.
Instagram, Snapchat, Periscope. Like, if a platform comes out, we try to get the handle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of preposterous, but it's, you know, but in reality, like, we're also not trying to live in a bubble. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't want to be part of an echo chamber where we're talking to the same 10 or 30 friends like over and over, you know, like folks have a lot of different ways to find an entry into anarchy, and we would like to make sure that part of that entry is understanding that that there are real risks. If you want to be serious about anarchy and you represent yourself as an anarchist, there's a chance you're going to be, you know, surveilled in some way, or that someone's going to pay attention. And so it's kind of irresponsible for us not to be trying to reach out on all these various platforms just to make sure that, you know, folks know that there are resources there.
So this year, as with many other years, ABC chapters around, or Anarchist Black Cross chapters around the U.S. hosted an event called Run Down the Walls.
Yep.
I heard someone say that it was hosted in 7 places. So L.A., Denver, New York City, Seattle,
Lake Worth, Minneapolis.
One more.
There was more than that, I
Really?
think. There was one in Connecticut. There was one in is it Chico?
Yeah.
There was one in Chico.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what that is and what like how at least New York City's went and sort of like how that is an interesting way to engage people in the community generally?
Yeah, I mean, the
and on the inside.
Yeah, the idea for Running Down the Walls actually came out of the Los Angeles Anarchist Black Cross. And, I mean, the idea is somewhat unconventional. I mean, anarchists kind of fall into these traps of having a benefit show of some sort. It's something that's like maybe kind of subcultural, maybe countercultural at best, but it's still within kind of a scene mentality. And the idea was that, you know, this is a project that can be utilized both on the inside and the outside. So for prisoners, it's used as an organizing tool. There are, for listeners who don't already know this, there are incredible divides that are reinforced by the state, by the prison, to keep prisoners separated. And it's difficult to cross a lot of these, like, a lot of the lines that exist.
And these are frequently like racial, religious, for instance.
Right, of course. Or, you know,
or gender,
some sort of, you know, gang affiliation. There might be, you know, whatever sort of underground industry is happening. And, you know, there are a few things that cross all of those lines, and a lot of it's like some of the physical activities, you know, whether it's handball or weightlifting or running. And so prisoners are able to use this run as a means to talk to other prisoners and, you know, to organize, you know, even if it's a small group of people. And then on the outside, we're able to use it as a fundraising event. Not all groups who organize do it this way, but the way that we organize the fundraising is that half of the money goes to the Anarchist Black Cross Federation's War Chest, which currently sends $80 every other month to 10 of the prisoners we support. And it's been doing that since, I believe, 1995. And that's the kind of thing, when you hear some of the older prisoners get out and they talk about the fact that part of what sustained them while they were in prison was the work of Anarchist Black Cross. Like, that's part of where that's coming from, is that war chest. And then the other half, what we do is we split all the funds that we raise between the war chest and then a local group. And this year, the funds went to a local organization called the Queer Detainee Empowerment Project, or QDEP. And, I mean, it's all kind of in the name. They work with queer folks who are being detained due to immigration status. And it's, you know, it's a really outstanding project, not exclusively run by anarchists, but working in a way that, like, really gets to really vulnerable communities. And so, yeah, our run this year went really well. We have been setting a higher financial goal kind of each year, and we've been very fortunate, and we've also hustled our asses off to meet those goals. And one thing that's interesting is where we host our run is in, like, kind of the middle of Brooklyn. It's at this park called Prospect Park. And it's a park that's utilized by a whole range of people, including a bunch of disgusting yuppies. As of about a year ago, the path that we normally laid out for our run has been commandeered by this disgusting, like, mobile food court that I will refuse to name. Last year, for 2015, our run actually ran directly through this disgusting yuppie food court, and the interesting thing that came out of that, though, is, like, we ended up talking to a bunch of yuppies about political prisoners, and sometimes it was really interesting. You know, we have this giant banner, this giant running down the walls banner. We have our literature rack and all of that out, and so we get a lot of folks who come by who maybe recognize Mumia Abu-Jamal. Maybe they recognize Leonard Peltier. Maybe they've got some inkling of there being political prisoners. Some folks are really engaged. Some people know about, like, at least some of the New York State held prisoners. And then there are a lot of just, like, completely oblivious, like, mostly yuppies who will, you know, walk through, and maybe they're confused over where they are in the world, and they think that this is somehow, like, because people are drinking water that this is somehow related to their food court thing that they're going to. But they'll stop and they'll look, and we've actually had some really good conversations. We also have stickers that are for anyone, but children seem to be attracted to, and so it's kind of fun to hand a sticker to a kid that is using like the American Sign Language character set, and it says it's ACAB, and then the kids will be like, "What is this?" And you explain it, and in very like explicit terms, like, "Oh, this means all cops are bastards," and then you see the look of horror on their parents' faces.
And you see as the SUV drives away later.
Yeah, exactly.
On the back of it.
Oh yeah.
Or on the kid's car seat.
But it's part of the model that we've tried to build, where we are willing to talk about prisoners to virtually anyone who will listen. Unfortunately, trying to like get parole for someone who killed a cop is not something that's going to happen unless there's like some sort of cultural shift, unless there's some mechanism by which there's some public support for that, and that's not going to come, just by happenstance. The reality is, like, the Police Benevolent Association and the Fraternal Order of Police run these huge campaigns to keep prisoners from getting parole. Like in New York State, it's absolutely vile. The letters that you see due to FOIA requests, like these letters that you see come out, then the language that they use, it is every bit the kind of white supremacist language you would have expected to come out of, 1950s Georgia, when they were, focusing on like civil rights issues there. Like, so.
And this is for deaths that occurred 40 years ago.
40 years ago, right. In the context of like a real war by the police on black communities. So that's part of the reasoning why we're willing to like talk to people who otherwise, who knows, maybe they're
you
our bosses
have
or
to.
our landlords. Yeah.
Yeah. You kind of have to, unless you want to be complicit and allow the state to easily incarcerate these people to death.
Right. Otherwise, it's just a performance. We put on black clothes and we talk to each other, and we're really angry about everything, but we're willing to only be angry with each other, and it's play acting at that point. And I don't see a lot of that, especially with ABC groups, which I think is I don't know. I think it's powerful. It doesn't matter like which issues the collectives are focusing on, whether it's prison abolition or mass incarceration or or explicitly political prisoner support. Folks are really out there like trying to engage with folks outside of their otherwise relatively small anarchist communities.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for all the work that y'all do, and it's great to get a chance to chat with you.
And with you.
Why, thank you. Cool. I had this moment of, holy did I actually press record? That's why I was like looking and like, no! But 36. We've been speaking with a member of New York City Anarchist Black Cross about the work that they do. Find out more about their work and how to get involved at nycabc.wordpress.com. For the next 10 minutes, here is a musical track that will get you into the holiday spirit and to beckon some much-needed rains in this area to put out the fires. This is Deluge from their album Ether. The track is Klartraumer, meaning lucid dream. Deluge is from Metz, Lorraine, in France. More from them and other awesomely dark and heavy music with good politics can be found at thedarkskiesaboveus.blogspot.com.
You're listening to WSFM LP 103.3 FM in Asheville, North Carolina. This is The Final Straw, and I'm William Goodenough. The show can also be heard on KWTF in Bodega Bay, California, KOWA in Olympia, Washington, and WCRS in Columbus, Ohio. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions or suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net. Also, if you care to, you can send us, if you're interested in rebroadcasting any episode or segment of the show, you are free to do so. Just send us an email so that we know you're out there. If you'd like, you can send us letters at The Final Straw, care of Asheville FM, 864 Haywood Road, Asheville, North Carolina, 28806. The show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned cooperative in Asheville specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a sample of Firestorm's catalog of books and zines, plus a full calendar of events at their website, firestorm.coop.